Hello, BookTube. I have another starter kit for you today, perhaps a less spiritually alarming one, a starter kit that happens to be about one of my favorite authors, Geoffrey Chaucer, who will be known to most of you as the author of the Canterbury Tales, and maybe as a singularly an amusing character in A Knight's Tale, the movie. And I have a series of books that I want to recommend to you here, of one kind or another, and we will start and finish with staggering works of scholarship, so maybe not technically in the remit of a starter kit. These are things you can live with your whole life. You don't have to just start there. Because, of course, when we're talking about Chaucer, we're first and foremost talking about literature, not about biography. So I want to start off with the greatest annotated edition of Chaucer that exists, and that is the Riverside Chaucer, in the same series that gave you the Riverside Shakespeare and the Riverside Milton. This is an incredible work of scholarship. There is this oversized maroon hardcover, and then there is also a blue Oxford trade paperback. Keep in mind, it's the same amount of erudition in either case. This hardcover is enormous with onion skin pages. So the Oxford blue trade paperback is much bigger, and also the type font is forbiddingly small. But if that doesn't bother you, this gives all of Chaucer's works in definitive editions with definitive, exhaustive annotations and appendices and whatnot. So this is a place to start for the whole works of Chaucer. Of course, I don't think, need to start there, but the problem with the Riverside Chaucer is the same thing with the Riverside Shakespeare. It kind of hits the ground running, which is why I say it doesn't really count for a starter kit. But I was going to be on here because this is really the whole world of Chaucer. But I do want to give you something a little bit more pedagogical to start with. And that is something we've seen on this channel recently. This is D.W. Robertson. This is his book, A Preface to Chaucer, which you can find in this hardcover. You can find it. There was a mass market paperback. There's also a popular trade paperback that's had a number of reprints. It's not in print anymore, but it is a very good overview and introduction to Chaucer's life, to his times, to his work. So if you're the type of reader of these types of classics who really feels like you don't want to go in blind, you don't want to rely just on notes as you're reading, you want to prepare yourself ahead of time, this is a good way to do that. This is a good way to do that. There's also a general introduction in the Riverside Chaucer. It would also be a good way to do it. And also keep in mind, Wikipedia is also a good way to do it, if you're that kind of a reader. And of course, if you're that kind of a reader, you might not want to stop with just an overview of Chaucer's work. You might want to read biographies. So I have a few biographies that I want to recommend. One is by Donald Howard. It was forever and ever the standard-bearing biography. It is still absolutely excellent. It's Chaucer, his life, his works, his world. Big, fat thing that isn't in print anymore, but you can find it in used bookstores. And as a big, sumptuous one-volume biography of Chaucer, it's really, really good. Well worth your time. Then we can do a much more modern version that looks at Chaucer in a slightly different, more cosmopolitan viewpoint, because Chaucer did a lot of traveling. Unlike a lot of English authors, he did a lot of traveling on the continent that informed his work and also broadened his worldview. And he left all sorts of records along those lines. And Marion Turner incorporated that into her biography of Chaucer, A European Life. And I had to put this on the list, not only because I was the first critic to praise it, and I praised it to the skies, but also because it's the only book on this list where if you buy the trade paperback, my name is printed on it. So I am blurbed on the trade paperback of this. So you'd have that to commemorate your starter kit. And when it comes to life's biographies of Chaucer, I have to include one more, even though Chaucer experts, authorities, historians, and whatnot were attacking this thing with knives bared the minute it appeared. It's not in print anymore, as far as I know, or they would still be attacking it. A whole new generation would be attacking it. This is The Life and Times of Chaucer by John Gardner, the novelist. And it was attacked right away, including most prominently by one particular critic who left not one single bead of pulse left when he left the battlefield. It was attacked for inaccuracies, for misreadings, for poor translations and whatnot. And I concede all of that, but this is still true in the main force, and also it's by a great novelist, and it shows on almost every page. So in terms of interest, in terms of readability, it puts the other two books to shame. So I don't believe that it's worthless. I think that as long as you should be properly evaluative of any fact that is relayed to you in a biography by anybody. As long as you go in with that in mind, you will be fine, and you will also enjoy the reading experience. But when we're done with overviews, and when we're done with when we're done with biographies, we come down to the works of Chaucer. And the works of Chaucer, in the tiny, timid, mouse-like circles where they produce any controversy at all, they tend to produce controversy because medieval studies, Chaucer studies, has their own version of actually hipsters. And those actually hipsters, when Chaucer comes up, will say, yes, I love his masterpiece. I just think it's incredible. And everyone should study it. And I, of course, can quote large passages from it. Everybody knows it. And I just think it's great that he's immortal for that classic. And when you say to these Chaucer hipsters, I love the Canterbury Tales too, they'll say, Canterbury Tales? I'm kind of aware of it. Of course, I was talking about Troilus and Cresside. Weren't you? That's what we think of when we think of Chaucer, is Troilus and Cresside. Don't we? I mean, did he write something called the Chiswick Tales? Or, as usual, actually hipsters are to be mocked. They are not to be listened to. They are figures of comedy. No matter how many degrees they have after their name, they are figures of comedy. They are made to be mocked, not listened to. Of course, Chaucer's masterpiece, despite being unfinished, is the Canterbury Tales. A collection of stories told by a group of pilgrims on their way to the shrine of Thomas Becket, that was supposed to be each pilgrim telling a number of stories on the way there, probably a gorgeous set piece there, and then each pilgrim telling stories on the way back for a compendium that would have been enormous. That didn't happen. That's not what we have. So we have the Canterbury Tales as they stand. I'm not saying that you shouldn't read Troilus and Cresside. You should read everything by Chaucer. And Troilus and Cresside is finished. Chaucer wrote it, he planned it, he wrote it, he finished it, he revised it. He was happy with the form that it was in at the end. Nothing like that is true for Canterbury Tales. Nevertheless, they are his masterpiece, and there are a whole bunch of ways to go at the Canterbury Tales. And I want to recommend a bunch of them for this starter kit, because none is inherently better than the other in terms of introducing you to this author. I will make a case for one way as being better in the long run. But the first and foremost thing that I have to put on this list, if we're talking about the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer's masterpiece, is the Neville Coghill version from Penguin Classics, which has made them a whole lot of money, and which is the Canterbury Tales of Chaucer brought into modern English by Neville Coghill, a friend to C.S. Lewis, friend to Tolkien. But he decided to make a version of Chaucer that required no glosses, no definitions, no nothing like that, in modern verse. And it took off like crazy. It's still in print by Penguin. It is still popular. And it is still an excellent way to be introduced to this author. It's still an excellent way to be introduced to the Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales was written 1,000 years ago, give or take. Give or take a few birthdays. It's describing an effectively alien world. If you're coming at it cold, like, for instance, as an undergraduate, why multiply your obstacles? Why do that? Why that world is strange enough as it is without also having you to learn the English that Chaucer was writing in. So I can still, with a completely clear conscience, recommend this version. And there are a number of different approaches like that. That the success of Neville Coghill's version of Chaucer has led many people to do that, to essentially translate these tales. And some of them are more successful than others. Some of them are in verse. Some of them are in prose. All approaches are valid. All approaches are are as effective as they are for you. The key here is not that you will read one of these things and then be frozen in that position forever. The key here is that you will use one of these things as an introduction to all the others and to Chaucer himself. So I'm recommending a few modernizations of the Canterbury Tales. I want, for instance, to recommend Peter Ackroyd's, even though it is downright strange. I believe that this was made into a Penguin Classic Deluxe Edition. This would be another Penguin version that you could get. I'm pretty sure the Neville Coghill Chaucer is still in print from Penguin. But this is another version of that. This is in prose, and it's got Peter Ackroyd's dramatic and storytelling fingers all over it. This is not just Chaucer. But maybe you want that. As an introduction, maybe you want that. Maybe you are in some way intimidated by the Canterbury Tales and you want something a little bit more companionable to introduce you before you dig down into the weeds, fine. Absolutely fine. But the same token, we can deal with a verse translation by Sheila Fisher. This is the Selected Canterbury Tales, and it's amazingly good. I praised this when it came out probably a decade ago, and I have recommended it to people as an amazingly good introduction to this work. It's not every Canterbury Tale or fragment thereof that we know about, but it's enough, and good enough, enjoyable, readable enough, certainly, to charm you, to let you know what you're getting into here, and maybe whether or not you want to really press forward. The same thing is true with the Norton Critical Editions that I've mentioned on this channel many times before, where you get a version of the work, whatever work it is, whatever canonical work it is, and then in the back half of the book you get essays, consideration, historical groundings, if the work has any historical antecedents. And the Norton Critical Edition has been doing the Canterbury Tales for a long time. This is what, the third? This is the third Norton Critical Edition, so any one will be fine. You get a selection of the tales. I believe that this has all of the tales that are even remotely close to complete, and the general prologue, which is one of the greatest things ever written in the English language, any version of the English language. And then you get footnotes at the bottom while you're reading the text. You get glosses as you're reading, but you also get essays, interpretive essays in the back that are really good. They will open up Chaucer's world to you in a terrific way. And then for versions of the Canterbury Tales, I want to recommend one more. I want to recommend it more strongly than any other. It also is a Penguin classic, only it's big. And it is Chaucer's version of the Canterbury Tales, because, as I've mentioned many times on this channel before, Chaucer wrote in an earlier form of English. Has lots of words that do not exist anymore, has lots and lots of influence of the French of the time. But it's not an alien tongue. You can learn to read it. In very little time, you can learn to read it. You might, for a little while, a week or two, need the glosses on the line to let you know this is a little odd or whatnot. But after very little time, you will be picking it up. And you should. Because, as I've mentioned before, Chaucer was a master of his art. And a lot of the wordplay in the Canterbury Tales is subtle. In other words, it's the first thing to go when Neville Coghill gets his hands on it, or Peter Ackroyd. It's too subtle for translation. It's not any fault of those gentlemen. It's just too subtle for translation. The sounds don't work exactly right. And they do in Chaucer's original, which is accessible to you. If you're willing to put up with it being a little strange for a little while, you will get Chaucer himself in this version of the Canterbury Tales. Also from Penguin Classic. I believe they do have all three versions still in print. And I always say, first of all, I say whatever works for you. Whatever gets you to love the great works of the canon. Whatever does that is fine by me, provided you don't stop there. Provided you keep exploring. The stuff that's on the canon is worth reading your whole lifetime, not just once. So I am perfectly okay for you to read a wooden, creaky prose translation of Homer's Iliad. Something that I think conveys almost nothing of the fire and the whirlwind and the action and the beauty of the original. I'm perfectly okay with you reading that if you fall in love with it through that. Because if you do, I presume you will go on to experience it in other forms. Same thing is true with prose or with modernized versions of Chaucer. I'm perfectly okay with you reading them and even loving them. I love them, Neville Coghill, myself. But I prefer it. I hope that once you love it, you will want to move on to the original. And with Chaucer, unlike with Homer or with Virgil or whatnot, it's relatively easy to do. It's still your language. If you're an English speaker, it's still your language. So I strongly recommend this Penguin version, which also has terrific notes, terrific everything. It's a great Penguin volume. And if that doesn't do it, we'll go back to Donald Howard, because he wrote a book called The Idea of the Canterbury Tales, in which he breaks down the Canterbury Tales, their structure, themes that run throughout, tonal changes. As you know, if you're familiar at all with the Canterbury Tales, the tone changes quite rapidly, sometimes from stark tragedy to bawdy humor to a little bit more po-faced humor that doesn't beat you over the head, all the while rife with social observations that are razor sharp. And this book does a very good job of laying all that out, clarifying all that, letting you know. I say with this, just as I do with the preface to Chaucer, you do not need it. You do not need it. I would argue that with Chaucer, you really don't need more than just the Neville Coghill. If you're not willing to put the mental effort into reading Chaucer in the original, then just pay 50 cents for a Neville Coghill paperback. They're everywhere. 2 million copies of that thing have been printed. I would argue they don't need more than that. That is certainly enough of Chaucer for Chaucer to work his magic on you, and that magic is pretty powerful. That's why this is such a great author. But if you feel like you need a little more superstructure to lean on, this will give it to you. That's a lot of fun. It's nice. It can be a nice feeling for a lot of readers to have that support to lean on. And when it comes to fun, we can talk about Terry Jones. And this is a book that he wrote called Who Murdered Chaucer? A Medieval Mystery. And this is not a mystery novel. This is a history of how Chaucer met his death. All sorts of fugitive literary traditions about that, nothing definitive. Chaucer was born in the early 1340s, and he died in 1400. So he lived for the second half of the century and saw it all. He lived for the second half of that century, essentially married into royalty, or close to royalty for in-laws, and was an active servant of the court for the whole of his adult life. So he wasn't retiring to a farm to write his verses. He was actively involved at court. And thereby Terry Jones argues in this, and so do his friends and collaborators, that maybe some of the conspicuous silences about his death are interesting in pointed ways. You don't need to believe anything of that. You don't need to swallow any of the supposition in this book to find it fascinating. So I thought I'd include it. But when Terry Jones calls that the death of Chaucer, Who Murdered Chaucer, a murder mystery, he's talking about sifting through historical records to find out what may or may not have happened, what bears supposition. I love that process. I always want to stress to people who think that history is boring that process is the most thrilling thing in the world. And it doesn't happen with the made-up stories. It only happens with fiction, with history and biography. It happens with nonfiction, and it's great. So I always want to stress that. But Chaucer was a prominent figure in court, and he traveled a lot. He knew everybody. And that makes him a promising source for fiction. Less promising than you would think, because believe it or not, despite the fact that we have his financial records, we know what money his wife spent on dresses, we don't know much about Chaucer at all. What he was like personally, unless you glean it from the poems, there is no hint at all. At all. Tall, short, unless you glean it from the poems, and that's tricky, because anything in that could be made up, we don't know. No idea at all. And yet, despite that fact, he has been the subject of murder mystery series, actual murder mysteries, fiction. And I wanted to recommend a couple of those. One is by Philip Gooden. This is Chaucer and the House of Fame. The cover that I had when I bought this didn't look like this, but this is the one I found online. And this is an ongoing series. I know there are at least 3 of these, where Chaucer is the main character. And in addition to being a royal servant and an emissary and whatnot, he is also a sleuth. And they're good. I also want to recommend M.J. Troe. M.J. Troe also did a series of books starring Chaucer as a sleuth, and they are much better than Gooden. They are terrific. This is The Knight's Tale, which, of course, is also one of the stories in the Canterbury Tales. These are really, really good. They are far-fetched, of course. Both series are, because we don't know anything about Chaucer. We don't know enough about him to make him a Sam Spade type character. We don't have any idea whether or not he'd even be interested in solving a murder, much less be any good at it. But I wanted to recommend both of those just in case, because the real work of fiction on Chaucer, you can't read. Unfortunately, it does not exist in the public eye. It is by yours truly. It is a novella. It's about 100 pages long. It's rippingly good. Set in 1372, set when a still up-and-coming Chaucer, still new to royal service, went on his first trip to Italy, across the Alps. And it's terrific, but it's not available. So you'll have to put up with these two, with these two to start with. And then I want to finish where we started. We started with the Riverside Chaucer, which is a massive work of scholarship. Doesn't seem like it belongs on a starter kit, but you might want to go into the deep end of the pool. And we're going to end on something just like that, something that, strictly speaking, doesn't belong on a starter kit. But if you like to challenge yourself, it's right there. And this is one of the Oxford Handbook series. I don't know if Oxford still does these, but for about 7 years, they did these big hardcover, very expensive volumes called the Oxford Handbook of, and then whatever the subject is. I had about 50 of them at one point or other because they're so good. They are not narratives. They are anthologies of the latest articles by scholars on the field, whatever it is. I think the only one that I still have is Animal Ethics. But they've done a few on Shakespeare. They've done, you name it. You name the subject, and they've done something on it. Every once in a while, one of the lesser creatures, Danish politics or something like that, will show up at my bookshop. But usually you never see them used. And they did a volume on Chaucer. Oh my God, the Oxford Handbook of Chaucer is so good. Oh my God, this is so good. Again, not sure that it belongs on a starter kit because it is woolly. If you are just starting out on Chaucer, some of these essays will be just flatly incomprehensible to you, but others will not be. And you might want to have this in case you're determined that although you're starting as a starter for Chaucer, you're not going to finish that way. You might want to stock up on this, get it in, and lay it aside for a year until you're ready for it. Same thing with the Riverside Chaucer, where you can read the works in the Riverside Chaucer, but as a reference work, as a cross-reference work, it's probably not going to do you much good at first if you're going to make a systematic study of this author. And that is it for the starter kit, but I want to stress that you don't need to make a systematic study of Chaucer. These are the tools that you could start with if you wanted to. But really, all you need, I would say, to start to love this author are two things. One, a concentrated read of his entry on Wikipedia, and then two, the mental flexibility to not maybe understand every word as you go through that big Penguin classic of just the Canterbury Tales as written by Chaucer. That's really all you need. He'll work on you. You give him any kind of a chance, and he will. He certainly did on me. So there you go. There's a Chaucer starter kit. Nary a cat in sight. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.